you get into patriotic philanthropy?
It's an interesting phenomenon in the sense that most of my philanthropy, to be honest, is I'm giving money to education, universities, K-12 education or medical research. But lots of people do that, and in better sums and bigger sums than me, and they're more engaged. But because I took one little area and no one else was doing much in it, it got more attention. And I more or less coined this phrase, patriotic philanthropy, though I guess all philanthropy is patriotic in a sense, you're helping your country. But what I meant by that was doing things to help your country when your country doesn't have the money to do it. And so I started really in a fluke way. I didn't have the intention to do it. If I had hired McKinsey and said, can you figure out how I can help my country more, and maybe a year they'd come back with a study and they'd have a whole bunch of things and it would sound good, but I really think the best things in life are done spontaneously. And so this was a very spontaneous beginning. What happened was I was invited to go to a viewing of the Magna Carta, the most famous document some people would say in history, at least in Western history. I went to this viewing and I looked at it and was told by the curator at Sotheby's. I'm not an art collector, so I'd never been to Sotheby's before, and I just was invited by an investment banker to go to it. And the curator said it's going to be auctioned off tomorrow night. It'll be probably sold to somebody outside the country. It's owned by Ross Perot. There are 17 copies of the Magna Carta in the world. There were various versions, 1215, 1224, 1225, and 1297, which actually became the law of England. The 1215 one that you all heard about actually never became the law of England. It was abrogated 2 weeks after King John put his seal on it. So it's historic, but it really didn't have that big an impact. The 1297 one did, and the impact is that it affected British law and ultimately was the inspiration for the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. So while it wasn't signed in this country, it did influence the Founding Fathers, as they said when they drafted it, and one of the reasons we broke away from England was because the Founding Fathers thought, and others in the country, that we had the rights of Englishmen, and the rights included the rights of the Magna Carta, and they weren't being granted by King George. So that led to the revolution. So when the curator said to me it's going to be bought by somebody taken out of the country, I was a little surprised. I said, well, who owns it? Ross Perot. He got in a fight with the National Archives. He had bought it in 1981 or 2 from a British family that had it in his possession for 500 years, and he brought it back to the United States, put it on display in the National Archives, and he got in a fight with them or something, and he wanted to put up for sale, and the highest price would win. And so I would have, maybe he should have said it should go to state as somebody who will be an American who buys. But anyway, he didn't do that for whatever reason. So I decided right then and there that I was going to go back the next night and buy it. And I didn't want to tell anybody because it sounds presumptuous to say to your wife, well, I'm going to go buy the Magna Carta tomorrow. And I would say I didn't want to tell my children because they would say, well, how much less money will this mean for us? So I didn't do anything. I just rearranged my schedule. I got back there the next night, and I got there in time, and they put me in a little room. I thought you go down and you wave your hand or something, but they didn't. They said, no, go in this little room. Go in the room. They lock the door. They put a telephone, and maybe some of you have done this, and they start bidding, and you get carried away. Any of you been in an auction? You get carried away, and you bid a little bit more than you thought you were going to bid. So has that ever happened to anybody? So so I'm bidding and bidding, and I'm feeling good about it. Then all of a sudden the guy says, sold. So okay, then it was me. So the head of Sotheby's, who was the auctioneer, came in and said, who are you? We'd never seen you before. I said who I was. He says, okay, you can afford this, right? I said, yes, I can. Okay, then it's yours, and you can slip out the side door, and nobody will ever know. We don't tell people. But there are 100 reporters there who want to know where it's going to go. So I said, I'll talk to him. I'll tell him why. And I went out and said, look, I wanted to give this as a permanent loan, and upon my death, it will go to the National Archives as a small down payment on my obligation to this country, because I came from very modest circumstances, and I rose up to have much more wealth than I really need, and I want to give back to the country that made it possible. Certainly for somebody with a name like Rubenstein might not have risen up in every other country, but this country I did rise up from very modest circumstances, and I'm very pleased that it happened, and I want to begin to pay back the country for it, and that's what I did. And what happened was I got in the habit of people calling me and saying, well, you'd like to buy the Magna Carta? I have one too. So eventually it turns out all these are fakes, but so I have a letter that says, I don't want to corner the market in the Magna Carta, so I'm not going to buy yours. But I did get in the habit of buying other documents. So I bought some rare copies of the Declaration of Independence, rare copies of the Emancipation Proclamation, rare copies of the 13th Amendment, signed by Abraham Lincoln, and I put them not in my home, but in places where people can see them. So the State Department, the National Archives, the National Constitution Center, and the Congress and so forth, where people can see them, and ultimately they will go to these institutions. I don't give them now because I like to make sure they're on display, and as the owner I can still say you have to display them. I did give one of my rare copies of the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln signed the original, which is in the archives, but he signed some souvenir copies that were auctioned off for $10 or sold for $10 a piece in the 1860s. Only about 11 of them remain. I own 2 of them. One of them I've given to the White House. It's in the Oval Office, and the President's very happy it's there because he's very proud of that document, probably the most important thing any President ever did by his signature. And one will go to the new African American History and Culture Museum.